The Persuaders, Season 1, Claude Hopkins, The Birth of Proof. Episode 1, The Man Who Knew the Numbers. Claude's finger hovered over the edge of the ledger. "I have something to say," he said louder this time. Cutting through the chatter in the meeting room, the voices stopped. A dozen heads turned, some frowned. Others smirked. Mr. Halden raised an eyebrow, clearly irritated. "Yes, Mr. Hopkins?" Claude stood, his heart thudded in his chest. The numbers swam in his mind, numbers that didn't lie, even if no one wanted to hear them before speaking. Claude took a deep breath and wondered to himself, how did I end up at odds with everyone in this room, even my own boss? It had started like any other day for Claude. The office was never quiet at the Bissell Carpet Sweeper Company. Men moved back and forth across the wooden floor, their voices rising in laughter and casual talk. Papers shuffled, chairs scraped, and the air felt busy with excitement. Claude sat at his desk near the side of the room, his head bent over a ledger. He was checking the numbers from the company's recent advertisement, the same ad everyone else seemed to be talking about. "Did you see the new ad?" one salesman asked, waving a newspaper in his hand. "Yes," the other replied with a grin. "It's amazing. One of the best ads Bissell has ever run." Claude didn't look up. His attention remained on the neat columns of figures in front of him. He tried to understand the reason behind the smiles and cheerful voices around him. Nearly everyone in the office seemed pleased, proud of the advertisement, certain it was a success. But the numbers in Claude's ledger told a quieter story. Claude's attention stayed on the open ledger as he tried to understand what real advantage the advertisement had brought to the company. It was true that the current ad was one of the most expensive Bissell had ever run, but the numbers showed no real gain. People now knew the company had produced a fine advertisement, but that alone did not convince Claude. In his mind, success meant something different. Claude believed the company should earn more money than it spent on advertising. Only then could an ad be called successful. Yet no one else in the office seemed to care about that. They were pleased simply because the ad looked impressive. That was enough for them. Claude was still lost in thought when he felt a hand rest on his shoulder. He looked up and saw Ethan standing behind him. "What are you doing, man?" Ethan asked, pulling a chair closer and sitting beside Claude's desk. "Just working on a few things," Claude replied quietly. "Come on, look around," Ethan said. Claude glanced across the room. Men stood in small groups, talking and laughing. Nearly everyone wore a smile, their voices full of pride and excitement. "Today's a celebration," Ethan said. "And look at you, you're still working." With a light chuckle, he reached forward and gently closed the ledger in front of Claude. "I was just finishing it," Claude said, but Ethan did not let him return to his work. He held Claude's arm lightly and shook his head. "Let's go and have a cup of tea." Claude knew it was useless to argue, so he agreed. They walked to the small cafe nearby, where Claude noticed more salesmen gathered together, laughing and talking loudly about the current advertisement. Ethan and Claude took their teas and sat near the window. Claude glanced outside. The streets of Grand Rapids were covered in snow. A few children were playing in it, throwing snow at one another and laughing without care. Claude watched them for a moment and smiled softly. They talked quietly as they finished their teas. Ethan was the only person at work who truly liked Claude. Most of the others kept their distance. Maybe it was because Claude wasn't very talkative, or maybe because he was too honest. He always said what he believed was best for the company, and that often made others uncomfortable. He didn't have many friends, even outside the office. Ethan was the only one who seemed to understand him, apart from his parents. After they finished their teas, they were called to join a meeting by their boss. Mr. Halden had arranged the meeting to discuss the current advertisement, and both Claude and Ethan went along. When they entered the meeting room, several workers were already there. A few of the salesmen glanced at Claude, then turned to one another and laughed quietly, as if they were making fun of him. Claude took a seat beside Ethan. The room was not very large, but it was enough to hold 10 or 15 people. Mr. Halden had not arrived yet. Claude remained silent, looking around the room. The voices around him were loud, with people talking over one another. Most of them were still discussing the advertisement, praising it with excitement. A few minutes later, Mr. Halden entered the room with a proud smile on his face. He looked pleased, almost satisfied. Claude felt a flicker of confusion. He could not understand how Mr. Halden could be so happy when the company had gained no real advantage from the ad. Still, Claude felt hopeful about the meeting. This was his chance to speak, to share what the numbers showed. He only wished that the others would listen and try to understand. "I'm sure you all know that we have created the best advertisements so far," Mr. Halden said, his voice filled with pride. "No other company has done anything like this before. Today is a day for celebration." The room broke into loud applause. Several salesmen leaned forward to congratulate Mr. Halden, praising him for making the company more visible and respected through the advertisement. Claude stayed quiet as he listened to the voices around him. One salesman after another shared their opinions, claiming that Bissell had become the most well-known company in Grand Rapids and that it would soon be famous across the entire country. "Everyone knows the Bissell carpet sweeper," one of the salesmen said loudly. Mr. Halden smiled, pleased and confident, as the words filled the room. Claude tried to gather the courage to speak. He felt the weight of the ledger still in his mind, the numbers clear and honest. While everyone else joined the discussion with excitement, Claude struggled to find the strength to raise his voice. Ethan noticed his silence and the tension on his face. "Claude," he asked quietly, leaning closer, "is something wrong?" Claude looked at Ethan and knew he could speak to him first, before saying anything to Mr. Halden. Ethan was the only person at work who might understand him. "Ethan," Claude said quietly, leaning closer, "don't you think they are being proud for no real reason? I've already checked the numbers. Bissell spent a lot of money on these advertisements, but the sales did not increase enough because of them." Ethan's eyes widened. He quickly raised his hand and shooshed Claude. "Shh," he whispered. "Don't say that here." He glanced around the room to make sure no one was listening, then looked back at Claude. "Don't say these things in front of Mr. Halden. He'll get angry with you." Claude felt his chest tighten. He had hoped Ethan would understand him, maybe even support him. But instead, Ethan looked scared. Claude realized that Ethan didn't want trouble and wouldn't stand beside him. Claude looked down at his hands, feeling alone. The numbers were clear to him, but no one wanted to hear them, and for the first time, he understood that if he spoke up, he would have to do it by himself. The salesman kept talking in loud voices, praising the advertisement again and again. Claude felt nervous as he listened to them, but inside his heart, he knew the truth. He wanted to speak honestly about the numbers. Even if Mr. Halden might not like it, the facts were clear to him, and no excitement or praise could change them. Claude took a deep breath. Ethan was trying to stop him with worried looks, but Claude knew he could not stay silent anymore. He remembered his mother's words she had told him many times while growing up, that honesty mattered more than comfort, even if it meant standing alone. "Can I say something?" Claude finally spoke. But the room was too loud. People were still talking and laughing, and no one seemed to hear him. Claude looked at Ethan again. Ethan's face showed fear, almost like a warning. His eyes clearly said that Claude was putting his job at risk by speaking against everyone else. Claude swallowed hard. Knowing what he was about to do could change everything. Claude knew his observation was true. He was not against Bissell at all. In fact, he wanted the company to succeed in a real way, not just become famous for a short time. To him, true success meant earning more than what was spent, not just receiving praise. "I have something to say," he spoke again, this time louder. The room slowly went quiet. Everyone turned to look at Claude. He was usually the silent one in meetings, the man who listened while others talked. Seeing him speak up shocked them all. A few people exchanged looks, surprised and confused. "What do you want to say?" Mr. Halden finally asked. Claude felt a small sense of relief. At least he had been given a chance to speak. He knew he had to use this moment wisely and explain what he had seen in the numbers. "I know everyone is very happy about the current advertisement," Claude began, "but I've gone through the numbers carefully, and I don't believe this is something we should be proud of." The mood in the room changed instantly. People stared at him, some with anger in their eyes. Mr. Holden's face grew tense, clearly unhappy that Claude was questioning the success of the ad. Soon, voices filled the room again. Some people asked what he meant by such an observation. Others shouted, calling his words foolish. A few even mocked him, asking if he was blind and couldn't see how big and impressive the advertisement was. Claude stood there, his heart racing, knowing he had crossed a line, but also knowing he had spoken the truth. Claude looked at Mr. Holden, who was staring at him with clear anger in his eyes. Claude could tell that Mr. Holden did not like what he had said. Still, he knew he was not lying. He was only speaking the truth, even if no one wanted to hear it. "Do you even know what you're talking about?" Mr. Holden said sharply. "Have you even seen the advertisement? It's one of the best we've ever made. Are you blind?" The room fell silent. Claude felt his heart beat faster, but he did not look away. He took a deep breath. He knew this moment mattered. If he stayed quiet now, nothing would ever change. "Maybe you're right," Claude said calmly. "It is one of the best-looking ads we've made so far, but we also need to look at the numbers." A few people shifted in their seats. "I don't see any real advantage from this ad," Claude continued. The room filled with uneasy silence. Some people exchanged looks with one another. No one spoke, but it was clear they were uncomfortable. They didn't want to admit that Claude might be right, even if deep down they knew he was. "Mr. Hopkins, you should remember that you are just a bookkeeper," Mr. Holden said angrily. "Know your place." With that, he stood up from his chair and walked out of the meeting room without looking back. As soon as Mr. Holden left, the room filled with loud voices. Some people started talking at once, while others laughed openly. A few of the salesmen glanced at Claude and shook their heads, clearly enjoying the moment. Claude felt the disrespect burn inside him, but he stayed quiet. "Claude, you really need to think before you speak about such matters again," Henry said, one of the salesmen, as he passed by. "I think Claude has completely lost his mind," Walter added. The two of them laughed together and walked out of the room. Soon, everyone left. The room slowly became quiet again, everyone except Ethan. Claude remained seated, staring at the table in front of him. He didn't say a word. His hands rested on the edge of the desk, and his thoughts felt heavier than ever. "Hey," Ethan said softly as he placed a hand on Claude's shoulder. Claude looked up at him and forced a small smile. His chest felt tight, and for a moment he thought he might cry, but he didn't let it show. He kept the smile there, even though it didn't feel real. "I told you to stay silent," Ethan said quietly. "I know," Claude replied, "but I thought I should be honest and tell them the truth." "They don't really care," Ethan said gently. "All they care about is hearing that their advertisement is the best. They don't want to listen to anything against it." Claude lowered his eyes. He knew Ethan was right, even if it hurt to accept it. After a while, Ethan left the office. Claude stayed behind, sitting at his desk to finish the work he still had to do. The office slowly grew quiet as everyone else went home. When Claude was finally done, he closed his ledger, put on his coat, and left the building. His house was only a short walk from the Bissell office, so he decided to walk. Night had already fallen, and the streets were covered in snow. Each step crunched beneath his boots as he walked home, alone with his thoughts. After a few minutes of walking, Claude reached his house. He knocked on the door and soon heard a familiar voice. "Coming!" his mother called from inside. The wooden door opened, and an elderly woman stood there. There was a gentle smile on her face. She always welcomed her son with a smile, no matter how tired or worried she felt herself. Claude smiled back and stepped inside. His mother closed the door behind him and followed him into the room. "How was your day?" she asked softly. "Good," Claude replied, as he walked to a chair and sat down. She looked at him closely. "If it was a good day, why don't you look happy? You know you can't lie to your mother." Claude lowered his eyes. He knew she was right. He could never hide the truth from her. Slowly, he told her everything about the new advertisement, the excitement at the office, and the numbers that did not make sense to him. After he finished speaking, his mother went to the kitchen and returned with a glass of water. Claude took it from her and drank a few sips, feeling a little calmer than before. "I am proud of you," she said gently. "It doesn't matter if others don't agree with you. I am proud that you stayed honest and did your work with sincerity." Claude looked down. "But Mom, my boss didn't believe me. Instead of listening, he told me that I should know my place." She sat beside him and placed her hand over his. Her voice was calm and steady, like always. "You shouldn't let his words hurt you so much," she said. "People often reject the truth when it makes them uncomfortable, but you see what others don't, Claude. You're the man who knows the numbers. That's a gift, even if it feels like a burden now." Claude looked down. Her words were soft, but they landed with weight. A small fire began to build inside him, not anger, but resolve. After she left the room, Claude sat alone for a while. The fire had gone out in the small stove, and the house was quiet. He opened his leather notebook and turned to a blank page. The edges were worn from use, but most of the pages were still empty. For years, it had only held numbers. Tonight, he picked up his pencil and wrote something different. Why does no one ask if the ads work? What does a customer need to see before they believe? What is the real cost of being wrong? He looked at the questions for a long time. Then he closed the notebook gently and set it down beside the lamp. Outside, snow continued to fall. Claude didn't know it yet, but he had already begun to leave the ledger behind. And so ends our first chapter in the life of Claude C. Hopkins, a quiet man in a noisy world. Tonight, he asked the question no one else dared to speak aloud. What is the real cost of being wrong? They say revolutions begin with shouting, but sometimes they begin with a man, a ledger, and a single question written in the dark. Join us next time on The Persuaders, when Claude takes a risk no one asked for. Will it cost him his job, or change everything? If you enjoyed this story, don't stop here inside the membership. You can follow Connected Stories every week and unlock full seasons to stay immersed without starting over. No hacks, no shortcuts, just real English over time. Join now at learnenglishwithprofejaime.com.